War has always shaped the world in one way or another. From the ancient clashes of empires to the global conflicts of the 20th century, war has defined borders, shifted power balances, and altered the course of history. Now, with rising tensions across multiple fronts, many are wondering if we are on the brink of another world war. Could World War III really be on the horizon? If you want to know more about it, then stay with us, as we're deep diving the current geopolitical landscape to explore this possibility, the Israel-Iran conflict. The Middle East has long been a region fraught with tension, and at the heart of much of this instability is the long-standing animosity between Israel and Iran. For decades, these two nations have been locked in a bitter rivalry. While they have not engaged in a full-scale war, their hostilities have played out in proxy battles across the region, particularly in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Iran's missile program plays a crucial role in this dynamic. Iran boasts a vast arsenal of ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel and U.S. bases in the region. The development of its precision-guided missile systems has also raised alarms, as these systems could target Israeli infrastructure with much greater accuracy. Iran's allies, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, possess tens of thousands of rockets and missiles, many of which can now reach deep into Israeli territory. Israel, in turn, has developed one of the world's most advanced missile defense systems, including the Iron Dome, which intercepts short-range rockets, and the more advanced David's sling and arrow systems, which target longer-range ballistic missiles. However, a massive barrage of rockets, drones, and missiles from Hezbollah and Iran could overwhelm these defenses, inflicting significant damage on Israel. In such a scenario, Israel might respond with devastating airstrikes on Iranian missile sites, escalating the conflict further. The risk of a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran remains high. With Iran advancing its nuclear capabilities and Israel's stated policy of preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, a preemptive Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities is always a looming possibility. Such an action could quickly spiral into a larger conflict, potentially dragging in other powers like the United States and Russia. Russia's role. The involvement of Russia in Middle Eastern conflicts, particularly in Syria, adds another layer of complexity. Russia is an ally of Iran and has worked alongside Iranian forces to prop up the Assad regime in Syria. Israel, while not directly at odds with Russia, has had to navigate a delicate balance in its military operations in Syria to avoid angering Moscow. In addition to its presence in the Middle East, Russia has been flexing its military might in Eastern Europe, particularly in Ukraine. The war between Russia and Ukraine has already shaken global stability, and Russia's aggressive stance has drawn widespread condemnation from the West. Moscow's military interventions have demonstrated its willingness to use force to achieve its geopolitical goals, raising concerns that Russia could become involved in other global hotspots, including a potential conflict between Israel and Iran. With Russia increasingly asserting itself on the world stage, any escalation between Israel and Iran could potentially pull Russia into the fray. If Moscow decides to back Iran in a conflict with Israel, the entire region could explode into a much larger war, drawing in the U.S. and other Western powers. The China-Taiwan tension. While the Middle East has long been a region of instability, Asia is now emerging as another potential flashpoint for global conflict. At the center of this tension is the island of Taiwan, which China views as a breakaway province. For decades, the Chinese government has vowed to reunify Taiwan with the mainland, by force if necessary. In recent years, this rhetoric has grown increasingly aggressive. Taiwan is crucial, not just because of its geopolitical location, but also due to its semiconductor industry, which plays a central role in the global economy. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's semiconductors, and a disruption in this supply chain would have devastating effects on the tech industry worldwide. China has been rapidly modernizing its military, including developing a formidable arsenal of missiles. These include the DF-21D Carrier Killer missile, which could potentially target U.S. aircraft carriers in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. The sheer range and precision of China's missile systems pose a serious threat to U.S. forces stationed in the Asia-Pacific region. On the flip side, the United States has ramped up its defense commitments in the region, sending warships and aircraft carriers to patrol the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. has made it clear that it will defend Taiwan in the event of an invasion, increasing the risk of a direct military confrontation between two nuclear-armed superpowers. In the event of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, it's highly likely that the U.S. would intervene. And if the U.S. is drawn into a war with China, other regional powers like Japan, South Korea, and Australia could also become involved. This could set the stage for a broader conflict in the Asia-Pacific region, one that could draw in even more global powers. The U.S. response. The United States has long been seen as the world's dominant superpower. However, recent events have shown that the U.S. is no longer as unchallenged as it once was. The chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the ongoing political divisions at home, and the rise of China as a global power have all contributed to a growing perception that the U.S. is in decline. Despite these challenges, the U.S. remains a key player in both the Middle East and the Asia-Pacific. In the Middle East, Washington has a long-standing alliance with Israel and has worked closely with Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE to counter Iranian influence. In Asia, the U.S. has numerous military bases and alliances, including with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. If a conflict breaks out in either the Middle East or Asia, the U.S. would almost certainly be involved. However, there are questions about whether the U.S. can effectively manage multiple conflicts at once. A war in the Middle East, coupled with a conflict in Asia, could stretch American military resources to the breaking point. Russia and China. One of the most concerning developments in recent years is the growing relationship between Russia and China. While the two nations were once rivals during the Cold War, recent geopolitical shifts have brought them closer together. Both countries share a mutual disdain for Western influence, particularly that of the U.S., and have increasingly cooperated in areas like military exercises, economic agreements, and diplomatic initiatives. If the U.S. becomes involved in conflicts with both China and Russia, it's not hard to imagine these two powers forming an alliance. A Russia-China coalition, particularly if backed by other nations like Iran and North Korea, could present a formidable challenge to the U.S. and its allies. Global economic implications. It's not just the geopolitical landscape that would be affected by a potential World War III. The global economy would also face severe disruptions. In the event of a major conflict, oil prices could skyrocket, particularly if fighting breaks out in the Middle East. Supply chains, already strained by the COVID-19 pandemic and other global crises, would be further disrupted, leading to shortages of goods and skyrocketing inflation. Nuclear weapons. One of the most terrifying aspects of any potential world war is the presence of nuclear weapons. The Cold War was marked by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, which essentially held that if either the US or the Soviet Union launched a nuclear attack, both nations would be obliterated. This kept both sides in check for decades. However, the increasing number of countries with nuclear capabilities, like North Korea and potentially Iran, presents new dangers. North Korea's rapidly advancing intercontinental ballistic missile (ICBM) program now gives it the ability to strike the U.S. mainland, raising the stakes even higher. Similarly, Iran's nuclear ambitions could further destabilize the Middle East and provoke a nuclear arms race in the region. While nuclear weapons serve as a deterrent, the risk of miscalculation or a rogue actor using these weapons is a constant threat. Even a limited nuclear strike could have devastating consequences, not just for the countries involved, but for the entire planet. The environmental, economic, and human toll of a nuclear war is almost unimaginable. Can World War III be prevented? So, are we truly on the brink of World War III? While the possibility exists, there are also reasons to believe that cooler heads will prevail. Diplomatic efforts, like those led by the United Nations and individual countries, are working tirelessly to prevent escalation. Economic interdependence, particularly between the US and China, also acts as a deterrent to all-out war. Neither side wants to destroy the global economy, which would hurt both nations. Additionally, the presence of nuclear weapons, while terrifying, also serves as a deterrent. No nation wants to risk a conflict that could potentially end human civilization. This is why many experts believe that while tensions are high, a full-scale world war is unlikely. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think the rising tensions around the world could really lead to World War III? Or will diplomacy prevail? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.